Hello and welcome back to the DJ Frequency podcast. My name is Jack. This is Dino. Good to have your company, Dean. Great to see you, my friend.
You too as well, Jack. Look forward to it every week. And boy, have we got a cracker on today, eh?
We're flipping back in time. Imagine, picture yourself flipping through records, stack of records, carefully placing the needle, and then fast forward to now, millions of songs in your pocket anytime. Dean, how did we get there?
Well, the evolution's been incredible when you think about it. You start way back, with the way they were doing 78 records with the more classical music, and then the birth of the actual 33 and a third, 1948 was when that sort of first hit the market. And we know that listening back then to a record, it was a ritual. You had so much going on, and it cost money. And you really treasured that piece of vinyl that you had every day.
Vinyl is I'm not from that era of music, but nowadays having vinyl is such an art form. I feel more
Mm,
connected to the music. Like I collect vinyl. I started when I was a kid. I
yep.
don't know why. I think it goes back to when I got into DJing and actually
Mm,
mixology style, turntablism.
yep.
And having something on vinyl, it just means more. Was that something that you had, from the early days?
Oh, 100%. I mean, my first album that I bought was Kiss Alive 2, which was a double album. I can't remember the price, but I remember it cost me 5 weeks pocket money plus extra chores to save up for that album. And when I had it, um, it was a treasure. And you didn't just have music to listen to, it was the whole experience of the album. You know, how you had the album art. And the Kiss Alive 2 album is pretty visual. So there's a lot going on. You had the liner notes. An album was an experience. When you listen to the album, you listen to it from beginning to the end of side one, you flipped it over and you played side two. And because of that physical ownership of all those things, the liner notes, especially the liner notes you read from beginning to end 1,000 times. The power of B-sides, flipping that record. And the limited access made that record really valuable to you as well. And it had I think analog kind of had a real warmth about it too.
Now, when you say the experience of reading the catalog, looking at the artwork, do you think people still have that connection with music, albums, and artists?
No, we've lost the art of doing that. We've lost that connection with our artists, and it's a real shame because I mean, artists used to put a lot of time and effort into things like cover art of their albums, because it had to be visual when it was sitting in a retail environment. They wanted people to buy it,
Yeah.
and these days it's sort of like more, how viral can you get?
Well, I think like what you said before, is you had a bit more of a connection with it. Um,
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
do you still remember the first time you put that Kiss album on?
Oh, 100%. I mean, and you know, you never skipped a song. You never skipped a second of that record. You listen to it from beginning to end, and the whole time you're immersed in the experience with the album, with the cover, with the art, with the band, with the producers and the engineers, because you knew who they were because you memorized the liner notes. And so it was that real sense of connection. Led Zeppelin never released a single because they wanted people to connect to their albums, not the individual songs. And that speaks volumes about where we've gone as music consumers, from that kind of connection to now, I think, being a bit disconnected from music.
Well, Dino, I think now we're almost going back. I'm about to turn 31 soon, and
Mm.
I feel like people my age are going back to vinyl.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's been a big resurgence in vinyl in the last probably 15 years. Big outlets like The Warehouse and JB Hi-Fi have a fantastic selection of vinyl. It's not cheap, but it's very collectible. And I think when you actually have the experience of taking the album out, because vinyl's got a smell too. The
Yeah.
album's got a smell, and you knew that smell when you unwrapped it, and all that newness hit you in the face. And that experience, I really feel sorry for today's young people because they don't have that same experience as we did then. Um,
Security to the music section, we have a sniffer Someone's sniffing the vinyls again. Security to the vinyl
Oh,
section.
there's nothing like walking into a place of like real groovy records in Auckland and just breathing it in. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. And of course, the other thing you got to realize too is that a lot of those albums that a lot of bands were bringing out, especially in the 1970s, things like Sergeant Pepper, Another Brick in the Wall, they were full cinematic experiences as well as music. And you know, we haven't seen that for a long time.
Yeah, well, then we fast forward from vinyl, and I know vinyl still has a place today. We both collect vinyl in our own right. But
Mm,
let's go to cassettes and mixtape culture. This is kind of when I started hearing music
mm.
as a kid, was on tape.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, cassette tapes made it more portable. You know, your music was more portable. Going to a party with a bunch of records was quite hard.
Yeah.
Now you could go with a pocket full of cassette tapes, and then it became portable too. Because in '79, Sony bought out the Walkman, so you could now, you know, with a whole bunch of batteries, mind you, take your Walkman anywhere, play as many cassettes as you like, and listen to it anywhere you like. And that was a real game changer, the portability of music. That was the first real portable music, the Walkman.
I remember having in the car, we had tapes and we would go on family road trips and we were
Mm,
allowed to all choose a tape, whether it
yep.
be from a garage sale or going to the shop and buying the tape. We used to go to the warehouse and buy tapes. My first ever tape was 50 Cent, the rapper. Yeah,
I
love
didn't
my.
know that 50 Cent released anything on tape.
Yeah, yeah, it came out. Oh, it came out on tape, and it was definitely a vibe. And then fast forwarding a couple of years to the kind of CD revolution, but with the tape. Before we get there, did you grow up dubbing stuff from the
Oh,
radio?
all the time. I
Yeah,
mean, you know, there wasn't just there was all sorts of things you could do too. You could have a DIY playlist, so to speak. You know, you could take 5 records and record 3 songs off each record onto a cassette tape. So you now had the advent of mixtapes. You know, you could take that tape with you to a party and say, "Hey, here's my 5 favorite bands." So you're now telling your story about music as well.
yeah.
And then, of course, there was the era of album dubbing, and I remember at high school there was a guy that used to sell albums on cassettes that he had recorded at home, and I think they were a couple of dollars each or something. Highly illegal, of course, but you know, we all did it because we couldn't afford the albums, but we could afford his dubs. And of course, recording off the radio as well, because you know, unless you were going out and buying every single that was released, and you wanted a good mix of music, you could record off the radio. The only problem was people like Jack talking over the songs for too long.
Well, you had a fun fact about this. You were talking to someone
Yes.
in the
Yeah.
industry back in the day.
Yeah.
Can you share that little tidbit?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so the idea back in the day when people were recording songs off the radio is that DJs would make an effort to speak from the beginning of the song until the lyrics started, and then again at the end of the song when the lyrics finished until the song faded out, so that they could basically try and ruin it for the people recording the song.
Because that's in the industry now, that is called hitting the post or hitting the mark, where
Right.
you but I have a rule because I was taught broadcasting by some old school disc jockeys, and they would always say on a classic song, you don't talk over the intro, but on maybe a newer song that isn't really popular yet, you can
Mm.
kind of talk right up into the post until the
Yep.
lyric.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know, I do a live broadcast of music as well, and you know, on that, people are telling me to stop talking over the music. But I mean, it's different now. You know, this is more interactive, and it's more like a show than it is just presenting music to people.
And CDs, going into the CD area, this is
Mm.
something that I was very fond of, and the whole well, it ties in quite nicely with the Napsters and the torrents and the Pirate Bays and illegally downloading our music, which I think a lot of people did. It was kind of the
Oh,
normal thing.
it was indeed. I mean, said the start of CDs. Though, I remember the first CD I ever bought. That was Bon Jovi, "Slippery When Wet" was the first CD I ever bought.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, CDs were a revolution, weren't they? You know, like we really sort of wanted something. We liked the idea of the digital sound being crisp and clear. There was a much longer playtime on a CD, so you get a lot more music onto it. And of course, although they scratched, there was less wear and tear, because you know as well as I do, you could have a CD that just had scratches all over it, it would still play. And I mean, it became the rise of like the mega album, you know, the album with bonus tracks, you know, that kind of thing. And then mobility grew even more, where people could start playing it in their cars now. You know, they were playing cassettes in their cars, but now CD players were in cars as well.
Well, that's it,
Um,
right, isn't it? It all developed with like music has kind of changed a lot of industries, and
mm,
car
mm,
is a huge one. Like the manufacturing of cars,
yeah.
you had to go with the times.
Oh, absolutely. Look, and I mean, it became a big thing, didn't it? I remember when I was buying cars back in the early 2000s, you had to have one with a CD player. I mean, it was prerequisite. And I remember actually this a friend of mine had a BMW that actually had a big sort of case in the boot that used to load 15 CDs. We thought that was epic.
Yes, yes, I remember fancy cars having that, which
Yeah.
then kind of transitions from that downloading era, and then the MP3 player, the iPods, of course, which is now just a huge conglomerate. But MP3 players, this is when I was taking music on the go. I had a paper run and I saved up all my pennies and I bought myself the small, like no joke, bro. It was so tiny, this MP3 player, and it had a
Mm,
USB built in, and you
yep.
could put it on the computer, direct download, and then I think I could fit maybe like 10 or 15 songs, and I
Mm,
would just chuck those on repeat. I knew
yep.
them all word for word, and that was what I'd be listening to. It was almost like your on the go playlist.
It was, you know, and I mean, I was the same. I mean, I was an early adopter of all that kind of technology back in the day, probably earlier than most people my age. But it was a revolution, because the other thing you could do with CDs, of course, we worked out later, was we could take the music off the CDs and put them on our computer as a digital file. And the MP3 compression made that music shareable, because, of course, before that we had the WAV or the WAV file, which was 3, 4, 5 times the size. File size of an MP3. So the compression of MP3 making it just made it so much more available. And then the file sharing revolution, that was just something else again.
I remember downloading songs illegally
Yeah.
in the time on a thing called FrostWire,
Hmm.
and I remember you would download like 4 of the same songs just in case if there was like a virus, or all of a sudden you'd hear, "I did not have relations with that woman." And you go, what's going on? Like, where'd you find this? Trap music. And you go, what is going on? All right, next one. And I would get viruses on mum and dad's computer. We only had the one desktop. We didn't have laptops.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like our only access to getting music other than going to the shop. That
Mm,
technology is awesome, and it's kind of paved the way for artists, but also the consumer to get music and also get music out. And then when we kind of transition into your Spotify streaming services, your
mm, mm.
YouTubes, the way of getting music now, it's accessible. You've got it.
Oh,
You want to listen to
100%.
this today.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember I was one of the early adopters of Napster, and I can remember on dial-up internet connection downloading MP3s that took anywhere between 15 minutes and 6 hours. You know, don't laugh. It could take 4, 5, 6 hours to download one song. That was on a dial-up connection, of course. But I mean, the revolution. I mean, Napster was just crazy, because the thing that changed was it became file sharing now.
Yeah.
So when I was downloading a song from Napster, what I had started to download, they were also uploading to other people those parts of the song that I downloaded. So it became this massive web of people sharing the song, and so that's how it worked. And then there's lots of bands. Metallica were a good example, who tried to shut down Napster, and
Yeah.
but what they didn't realize is this was just the way that the music industry was going, and they really had no choice but to try and leverage what they could now, because it wasn't changing. People had found a way. And you know as well as I do, Napster was shut down by the music industry. LimeWire pops up. LimeWire was shut down. FrostWire pops up.
Yeah.
So you can't stop it. It was. I knew that once it was there to stay. And being an early adopter too, I had that very arrogant kind of attitude that I had been paying so much money for music over the
Yeah.
years. It was time for me to get something for free.
Yeah, it was almost like, "Oh, it's my turn," like, "Oh, what about those artists?" But at the
Yeah.
time, we didn't realize you're actually taking food from their table.
I don't think we realized the impact it would have on them. I think we knew, you know,
The scaling.
fundamentally that it was going to cost them money, but I didn't think we really understood the impact. But see, the thing that got um, for the industry, it was the music companies that were really losing out. Even though the artist was losing, the music companies were seeing a problem, whereas we might not be relevant anymore.
Yeah, that's and I would like to think they've definitely, bridged the gap and they've changed their way of thinking, and I
Oh,
think
they
they
had
would
to,
have. Yeah, well, they
because
have.
as that technology got better and better and better, they because every time they stopped it with one thing, the
Yeah.
next piece was just smarter and better again. When you think, you go Napster, LimeWire, FrostWire, BitTorrent, every time we evolved with the way that we downloaded and consumed music and they shut it down, we just found a new way. So I
Mm.
think they realized eventually by about maybe, I don't know, 2008, 2010, that we just have to go with this because, we haven't got any choice anymore.
Yeah, it makes me think also, we digress a little bit, but it makes me think of the movie industry where
Yep.
now where we're at, we are in the iTunes, the iPod,
Hmm.
the Spotify's, the app, everything is on our phones and so accessible on an app. But
Yep.
even movies used to be the direct form of getting your music, getting a new album because they go, oh my gosh, there's that new single for the Fast and the Furious movie. And you would listen to the soundtrack and then you would get the soundtrack on CD or get it
Exactly.
on
Yeah.
Spotify, and then all of a sudden, now music is coming from your friend's email. You're getting a link to a Spotify track. You're getting a TikTok video.
Exactly. And I mean and that's been the progression, hasn't it? And we've been allowed to progress like that because the music industry bit the bullet
Yeah.
and decided to run with it. And I mean, these days you can ask any artist, if you asked the likes of that were still touring, Taylor Swift, Guns N' Roses, whoever it is, they make money by merchandising and concert ticket sales. That's how they make their money now. They make very little off their actual music compared to what they used to with albums, cassettes, and CDs.
How do you
It's,
think touring has changed as well? Obviously, COVID was a big spanner in the works, but how do you think touring and actually performing live has changed?
um, I guess the ones that I'm used to seeing live have got a lot older and probably can't sing as well as they used to.
Yeah.
But I think that because the live show has become so important to the live artist or to the artist, that putting on good shows that people will remember is paramount because you want them coming back next time.
And it's almost how you get your fans to become
Absolutely.
yeah, more loyal,
Yep.
deeper.
And I think too that because they know now that we have to record new music because our fans want to hear new music. That's what they
Yeah.
want. So we have to do it. But I think they understand too that really the live show and now the fan connection um, is more important than those album sales that they used to have.
How
Or
do
the
you think, Dino, sorry to cut you off. How do you think artists are actually connecting with their fan base? What platforms they're using, social media? Has
Yep.
their connection lost? Like we were talking about with the vinyl, you knew the production manager, you knew who
Hmm.
did the sound engineering. When now I could hear a song and I go, oh, I know the artist is da da da, but I don't know anything else about it.
Well, that's right, and I think that connection with their audience has changed because the advent of meet and greets, they're huge now. Every band does meet and greets before a concert. Well, not every band, but a lot of bands now do meet and greets. Billy Idol was charging $250 for a selfie backstage. So these guys are obviously having to make money, from this. This is the way they make their cash now. So, it probably in a way it's made it better because
Yeah.
the fan has become closer to the artist through social media and through those opportunities to actually meet them. Because when I first saw Kiss in 1980, they came here as still the enigmas. You didn't know what their faces looked like. You knew them from costumes and makeup, um, and there was no way you were getting close to them ever. Not a chance in 1980 unless you knew someone in the industry. But of course, when they came here in 2005 2015. I hope I got that year right. In 2015, I did the meet and greet VIP experience, and that was hanging out with the band, and literally hanging out with them before the show. They did a 45-minute acoustic set for the meet and greet people in the sort of lobby. Before the show, we got to go backstage and have photos with them in their costume and, high five them before they went on out of stage. That doesn't happen in the 1980s, but it happens now.
Yeah, I like that. I just, it takes my heart to the last 12 months. We had a couple of concerts booked, and artists constantly forgetting New Zealand and booking a tour. And this could just be a New Zealand thing. So if you're tuning in from somewhere else, then go and see your live artist. But here in New Zealand, we get neglected, and they only go to Auckland, and I understand that they have the population. Totally agree. But we're booking tickets to fly from the bottom of the South Island to go up north, and then all of a sudden, a week later, oh no, I'm cancelling due to scheduling conflict, and we go, what the heck? Like,
Yeah,
come
what about
on.
my schedule?
Yeah, like I
Yeah.
want to see this artist. I have the vinyl, I have the t-shirt, I have the Spotify playlist for Africa of your music, and they kind of just chuck you to the side, and you feel it.
Yeah, and that's just location, location, location. We don't have a big market, and that's just a sad fact that when Kiss go back to Kiss in 2015 when they came here, we got about 25% of the show that Australia got because we didn't have a venue big enough to fit all their stuff. You
Yeah,
know, at Spark Arena, it wasn't big enough to put on the full show. They had to strip it back by 75%.
that's
Um,
huge.
yeah, that is huge, and I mean, because a Kiss stage show is huge, it's
Mm,
fireworks and it's pyrotechnics and, it's massive. So we got a bit of it, but a very small fraction of it. And I mean, Taylor Swift, when she last went to Australia, she didn't come here. The big radio competitions was to go and see Taylor Swift in Sydney or in Melbourne or in Brisbane or wherever. And it's because they just can't make the numbers work here.
yeah.
There isn't, for the cost of what it costs to bring here versus the profit they're going to make from the people of New Zealand, it's not financially viable. And you got to kind of understand that.
Dino, let's fast forward. We've touched on the past. We've touched on the streaming area.
Mm.
Now let's go to your social media era, which is where music is coming from now. You have 15 seconds to catch someone's attention. We're all goldfish. In fact, it's actually probably within the 3 seconds of scrolling. If I'm looking at new artists, I want to be hooked straight away. How do you think this is changing the game and to where we're heading?
Well, I think the way that artists and bands release their music these days is a lot different. You'll see the hype reels on TikTok and Facebook before they release a song. Whereas before, all we really got was a poster in the shop, maybe the week before or a couple of weeks before. But they might hype these things for a month before they drop them. And with the power of social media and the way that people are, it's ingrained in their culture and in their habits to share the stuff they like with all their friends. And of course, that sharing just compounds. So I mean, it's a totally different way of getting people's attention these days.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that some of them do it smart. Whether they deserve the fame and fortune, I'm not sure. I've got a saying that says, artists these days, they don't seem to have much talent anymore. Back in the 70s and 80s, if you wanted to record an album, you had to have real talent.
Yeah, musicians are mainly a thing of the past.
Well, you can go, being a musician before was like, you got together with your friends and you practiced and you then got a band together and you spent, a year on the road promoting your band and doing whatever you can to get people to listen, making your own cassettes of your band, recording from a boombox. You did all that stuff and it took you, a year, 5 years, whatever it took for you to break through and finally get a record deal or to perhaps get a single in the charts or something like that. And these days, you can record a 15-second video that's viral to 10 million people in 5 minutes.
Which is not a negative because the people who have paved the roads before us did it so, you crawled so we could run.
I suppose so. I guess, if you look at it logically, what people are doing these days is just a very clever and a much quicker way of doing what we used to do.
utilizing what we have now.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all we had was printed posters and vinyl records and cassettes
And
to
pigeon mail.
and pigeon mail. That's right. Snail mail or whatever you want to call it. It's you had your KTEL, catalogs that used to come out and used to tick the albums that you wanted to order next month and things like that. But I mean, these days it's just the information that you have at your fingertips is just endless. Let's face it.
Yes, it really is. And it's exciting. Now, next, I don't know, question or thought. Where do you think we're heading? We know where we're at right now with all the streaming services, with
Yep.
your TikToks, Facebooks, Instagrams, etc. Where do you think we're heading in music streaming and performing and artists in general?
Well, who knows? I mean, if someone had told me as a 15-year-old in 1985 that I was going to be carrying,
Woo!
say, hey, stop it, stop it. But if someone had told me in 1985 as a 15-year-old that I was going to, in sort of 20 years' time, I was going to have, 20,000 songs in my pocket, I wouldn't have believed them. I would have thought they were mad, crazy, insane, you know. And then, going from that to 10 years later, literally having millions of songs in your pocket, that's just we can't even comprehend. But I guess that's just progress. And, technology in the last, when you think how far we've come with technology in the last 30 years since the advent, I guess, of the internet hitting the home in about 1995 to where we are today, uh, incredible. I mean, it's just because when we first had the internet in 1995, we were still collecting CDs.
Dean,
Yeah.
final thoughts. Do you think music, the connection has lost with between the listener and the artist? Or do you think this is just how we are evolving, like we've just been talking about?
I think, as I talked about it earlier, I started to convince myself that maybe because of the advent of streaming music and Napster and MP3s and all that kind of thing, in a strange kind of way, it's brought the artist closer to its fan
Ooh,
because they needed that connection with the fan now that they didn't have before through that physical media. They now needed that physical connection with the fan instead because the fan had lost that connection. So I think they were smart, and I think they realised that, and that's where the advent of bands doing the meet and greets that I talked about before has come from. Sure, it costs money, and sure, it's money that goes in the band's pocket, but they need to be doing this. And I think it's actually changed in a way for the better, definitely for the better and with the access we have.
yeah.
But probably that fan band or artist connection has become closer because of it as well.
And I think regardless of whether you're a collector of vinyl, CDs, tape, you stream on an online service, you
Yep.
get it for free on YouTube or however you listen to music, keep listening to it. But I would recommend you following the artist's page,
Yes.
liking their stuff,
Yep.
sharing their stuff, actually connect because we have that accessibility to these people, these artists that
Absolutely.
we love, embrace it. Like, don't be fearful. I know I talk to a lot of different people when it comes to music, and people
Mm,
seem to sometimes fear the change and they're
right.
scared of what we've developed to. And, back in my day, we had this. It's like, yes, that's great. But without that, we can't evolve and go where we're heading, which is exciting.
Oh, well, it is. I mean, who knows what happens in the future? It could be that a song is just a mental thought and you think it and it plays in your head. Maybe I can come over to your place and I can say, hey, Jack, listen to this song. And I just go bang and it's in your head. Who knows? Who knows where it's going in the future? Um, but I think where we're at now, I think the way technology's progressed, I think it's been for the better. And just, yeah, like Jack was saying before, supporting artists and bands on social media costs you nothing. Give back by supporting them on social media. If you want to, absolutely, invest money in what they're doing on social media, do that if you can afford to do it as well. But I mean, show them the support because they still need it.
Well, I think we're going to end on that note, Dino. You couldn't have said it any better. Once again, wherever you're tuning in from, wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate your company and we will see you next week where we dive deeper into music. And once again, this is the DJ Frequency with Dino and Jack. And it's great to have your company. Thanks so much. Good to see you, Dino.
You too, mate. Take care till next week, everybody. Peace and love.